Well, here I am. When I'm not supposed to be here. Let's see. There we go. Now, somebody, where am I? Yeah, there we go. Keith Hayes with Tiny Tales at Tea Time. And it's rather a softer approach to things that we normally take, just a little bit of reminiscing, little things that have happened during the day. And I have to say that the intro and now the extra have no music, but it just occurred to me. Do you remember, those of you who are old enough, when tea time was sacred, is that you were sat there and told to stuff your face with cake and to shut up and not say a word? Oh dear, dear, dear. Those were the days. Those were the days. And we felt very sensitive about it. My goodness me, we were 7 or 8 or even younger, and we knew how to handle the world, while all these grown-ups around us didn't. But I was just reminiscing, looking back through the files to see what might be of interest. One of the things that I think that you should perhaps remember is Christmas 2 years ago, because this last Christmas, and probably even the Christmas before, wasn't that great. And we were just about getting used to the fact there was going to be something called a pandemic. But here is just one or two little snippets captured from Christmas 2019. Oh, memories, memories, memories. Good afternoon to Gary Toynton, who is with us again. Gosh, now that's loyalty. Tuning into Mirador twice in a day. Even I couldn't do that, Gary, but welcome anyway. This is just a little bit of memory lane for us. And it's a variety of things that have either happened in my life or in Mirador's life or whatever. And in 2013, I spent a year and a half in Sarajevo, in Bosnia. And Bosnia had been particularly badly hit in the Balkan War, where, in fact, the Serbian army had surrounded the town, which sits in a sort of horseshoe of hills, and they just lobbed mortars in, and it was like a turkey shoot. And the market that I shopped at a couple of times a week to get my fresh fruit and vegetables and so on, I got to know the storeholders quite well. But a number of shoppers and market holders had been killed when the mortars lobbed through. And if you walk around Sarajevo, even to this day, there are little red splotches in the pavement put there to show where mortars landed. It was a particularly tough time, and the British Army were there. And I remember seeing pictures of, I think it was General Rose, riding a tram out of the centre of Sarajevo, a tram which I took many times. But I was in slightly safer time than that was. I wasn't in the turkey shoot. But just to show you how the population of Sarajevo tried to fight back and get back to normality, is here is a little a video. It's only a little strip, but in 2013, this is how they celebrated with a half marathon in the streets of Sarajevo. Well, I remember that day very well, and it was a lovely day, and a lot of fun was had by everybody out in the centre. And the most of the marathon runners were not only the top officials from the EU, who I thought were very brave to try a half marathon. It's 13 miles. I couldn't have done it. But were also British soldiers. The British Army were very much in evidence there. And in fact, the British Army did a tremendous amount of good in Sarajevo amongst the youngsters with footballs and football teams and trying to organise competitions and so on, which was quite remarkable and very helpful to a community that has undergone a real bashing. And boy, did they undergo a real bashing. Incidentally, I can't really remember the name exactly, but it was the Linden Tree. It was a restaurant that I went to on many occasions. It was one of my favourite restaurants. Their food was very good, but you could sit outside and look at the mountains and so on. And there was a big picture outside because when he was in Sarajevo, Bill Clinton had actually dined at that. So there we are. I've got a great connection with Bill Clinton, and we shared the same restaurant in Sarajevo. Not many people could say that. Now, the other thing that has happened today, which and it is CBS in the States that have put out just a very short preview of the interview, the much heralded interview with Harry and Meghan on the Oprah Winfrey show. And much has been said about it, and much has been released, and much has been titillated, and much has been controversial. But one thing that Harry does say here might strike a chord with some people. I don't go along totally with him, but nonetheless, I do understand that a young man could remember very dramatically the way that his mother was treated. And in his view, it was unacceptable. And that's why he says he's drifted out of royal life. The main program is later this week. But for the moment, here's just a little snippet.
Because I can't begin to imagine what it must have been like for her going through this process by herself all those years ago, because it has been unbelievably tough for the two of us, but at least we had each other.
So there you are, this upcoming Sunday, March the 7th on CBS. I don't know whether we'll get it here. Nobody's saying whether it's being released here or not. But you can catch it on Sunday. And now, how long are we going? 15 minutes. This is just a little bit of a pastime through the day. When I look through quite often when I'm looking through for program material, I come across something and I think, oh my gosh, that will never see the light of day. unless perhaps we do something like Tiny Tales for tea time. And I'm probably the last person that should be telling tiny tales at tea time. I don't drink tea anymore, unfortunately. Oh dear, dear, dear! I'm still English, but champagne gets in the way. That was just a little bit of a snippet, a memory of Christmas 2 years ago when it was Christmas and life was like that before lockdown. A little look at Sarajevo 7 or 8 years ago, and having come from being battered by mortar fire and deaths. And one of the things about the uh, I found difficult to swallow. There were cemeteries, and the gravestones were all the same. It was just a sort of a square needle, about 6 or 7 feet high, pointing to the sky. The only difference was that there were names on it. But in all instances, the deaths were, I think it was between 1991 and 1997. Everybody in those cemeteries, and there were hundreds of them around Bosnia, were killed as a result of a civil war, if you like, a war within a war. They were killed either excesses from armed forces invading or from the siege of Sarajevo, which went on for quite a long time, and a lot of people were killed. And when you looked at just in one cemetery and saw the number of people that had died, and then you realized that as you drove around, you could see lots of these cemeteries in all sorts of places. Then it was one of those things that in many ways, in many ways, brought home to you what that sort of war is like. A war that probably we paid very little attention to here, although at the time the pictures were rather graphic coming out of Sarajevo. And I do remember that there was a little uh, pub, I think it was called the Goldfish Bowl, um, but La Rubica, perhaps. I'm guessing a little bit. It was a lovely little pub, a very unusual little pub. And one morning there was a bit of a stir at the door, and I actually walked to the door and said, "What's going on?" And somebody who spoke English there said they're bringing back more bodies from Srebrenica. Those bodies that had been murdered, if you want to put it that way, but had been killed in the conflict, and they were bringing them back in long haul trailers, lorries, to be buried properly. They'd been exhumed from mass graves. So in my time there, although I suppose that it is much better now, but in my time there, the memories of the Balkan War, and same thing in Kosovo. I spent time in Kosovo, and in a funny sort of way in Romania. And I travelled and stayed in Montenegro, in Albania, in Serbia. I stayed and worked in all those countries, and the scars of war were very evident, and the aftermath of war, which is so dreadful, was in your face every day. Anyway, I just thought that I would show you a little snippet of when they started to get themselves their act back together, and rather pleasant. It was a very pleasant day. And that's what communities can do when they fight. Hang on. It's still Gary. I thought there was an extra one there, but I'm sorry, Gary. You're all on your own this afternoon. But good afternoon to you. And that was the scene in the Balkans from about 2000, 1999 to when did I first last leave the Balkans? The West Balkans, anyway, is 2013. In fact, I don't think I've been back since then. Perhaps once I have. Yes, I have. I was back in 2014, I think, but since then I haven't been back. Although I maintain very strong links with several of the Balkan countries. But they fought back, and they're trying to get a civilized society together. And guess what the stumbling block is in Bosnia? Yeah, it's the politicians. It is they have elections, and the elections are quite clearly cut. It's obviously got to be some form of a government that is a combined party government, a government of unity, is anything there but. It's disunity. And while I was there, from 2013 on, I think for about 4 years, they didn't have a government because they couldn't get agreement. And you would think that people would want to do that at that level to help their community, but they don't. At that level, they don't. It's the people on the ground, the people on the ground that can bring together a nice day such as that, or to invite Bill Clinton and me to have a nice meal at the Linden Tree. Okay, until tomorrow morning. Oh, by the way, on Wednesday, like most people, and so you can expect that ours will be a little bit different. But Paul Fowl and I will be watching the budget quite carefully. We shall go live. We shall have a live broadcast, and we'll chat through what this means to our part of the world as we see the budget unfolding. Many people say it's going to be a very uncomfortable budget, but who knows? Because although bits and pieces are seeping out, I think most of those come from briefings from people who have a vested interest. So it will be an interesting budget, and we, Mirador, will bring the bits that are important to you live on Mirador television to this part of the world. Okay, until tomorrow morning, and once again, Paul Fowl will be with me to chat through what's happening in the world, both on COVID and on the economy and on the rise in crime, which is beginning to worry us all. Until then, this is Keith Hayes and Toodle Pip, and I'm sorry there is no music on this.